John the Revelator was one of the oldest surviving apostles, making it to a whopping 101 years of age before passing of natural causes. During such time, John contributed a great deal to Jesus' developing church and provided a variety of religious material to follow, including the Gospel of John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and of course the book we'll be discussing today, which is the Book of Revelation. In today's video, I'm only going to challenge the preconceived notion that 666 being the sign of some antichrist, and will hopefully offer a more refreshing developmental perspective from the Urantia Book and even the Book of Revelation. I will surmise that the number has more to do with our own beastly origins, rather than some incarcerated Lananderdek son, such as Lucifer, Satan, or our once planetary prince, Caligastia. Due to these inaccuracies I'm about to reveal, I will not even attempt to further dispute the other signs and symbols associated with such a mysterious text. Since today's video will be attempting to prove a singular point or notion, I will mostly use evidence presented to us in the Urantia Book, and will be referring to such a text far more frequently than usual. Before we get into my rebuttal, let's take a look at the quote itself, surrounded by summary context, in which we discover in the Book of Revelation, and the editions most accessible in the United States. In 1318, we read, under the Beast Out of the Earth section,
"This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. That number is 666.
Now let's break this interpretation apart some more. When it comes to the King James and the New International Versions of the Holy Bible, the
"For it is the number of man"
quote remains pretty consistent and most certainly seems to point towards an antichrist or iniquitous individual. However, when we start looking at other interpretations, such as the God's Word translation, we are given the more inclusive response,
because it is a human number,
or the Lexham English Bible,
for it is man's number.
Again, for those of you that are having trouble following, these translations are no longer discussing a singular identified man, but humanity itself. If we start extrapolating that conclusion associated with the number 666, we are entertaining a concept of something entirely different. The edition that most certainly serves my purposes for this video can be found in the God's Word translation that is directly translated from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek texts that reads for 1318,
In this situation, wisdom is needed. Let the person who has insight figure out the number of the beast, because it is a human number. The beast number is 666.
All right, guys, 666. This presentation presents a far broader identification, rather than other more established translations of the Holy Bible. Now, looking at the text, the number 666 no longer identifies as a specific individual, but is now interpreted as a human species identification number that we all share as being part of humanity on Urantia. Again, this is just 3 sentences here that presents an entirely different angle regarding the translation that one chooses to use regarding to God's supposed word. For those of you that follow the Urantia Book, we know that the previous war in heaven was known as the Lucifer Rebellion, consisting of the Declaration of Liberty. As a brief summary of such a declaration, suffice it to say that it consisted of believing that God didn't exist, that ascendant mortals were not worth the effort, and that local systems should operate more locally, essentially elevating our planetary prince, Caligastia, to our planetary sovereign pretty much overnight, who is most associated with the personification of the devil due to their unrighteous and impulsive behaviors. We learn in 67.1.1 that the devil reigned faithfully on our planet for around 300,000 years, until one fateful day when he was propositioned by Lucifer's first lieutenant Satan to review the Declaration of Liberty we discussed earlier. The planet that received this inspection, by the way, was numbered 5,342,482,337,666. That can be found in 15.14.8. Fast forwarding through the rebellion that ensued, we on the planet of Urantia developed quite the negative reputation compared to the rest of the local universe, falling under the beastly reign of such a tyrannical monarch who was never worthy to lead our planet in absolute power so quickly. Hint, hint. It was this very rebellion on our planet that motivated our creator's son, Christ Michael, to eventually pay us a visit, with the statistical probability of him doing so being in the millions. For those of you that missed it, notice that the last 3 digits of our planetary number ending in 6, 6, and of course another 6. Perhaps you're beginning to see the connection that I'm establishing. So in response to this reputation that was most representative of a planetary form of martial law, our local number of 666 perhaps was spoken to many, conveying a sense of infamy, synonymous with going against the divine order, and being most representative of us defaulting to our carnal instincts and immediate gratifications associated with selfish and prideful beastly attributes. The Urantia Book claims to have the real, unadulterated, and more complete experience that John had during these visions that created the Book of Revelation. The Urantia Book teaches us in 47.10.2 that some of the images that John the Revelator saw included the following.
John the Revelator saw a vision of the arrival of a class of advancing mortals from the 7th mansion world to their first heaven, the glories of Jerusalem. He recorded, "And I saw it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who had gained the victory over the beast that was originally in them, and over the image that persisted through the mansion worlds, and finally over the last mark and trace, standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of God, and singing the song of deliverance from mortal fear and death."
We later learn that the harps of God are a communication device used to overcome the perceptory deficits we still experience in Urantia form on the next planet that are used to be able to hear space communications between the worlds of creation that are not currently quarantined. Mark of the Beast. All right, well, hopefully I have begun making some compelling arguments to start questioning some of the completeness and accuracy associated with how we view the Holy Bible, and perhaps increasing the Urantia Book's credibility. Not only do we have to decipher a man's reaction associated with signs he was seeing, which of course was John, but we also have to contend with his full message being distorted over the years, whose meaning could be literally lost in translation. With that said, let's talk more about what the human 666 number actually represents according to the Urantia Book pertaining to the creature vestiges that we will one day shed as we ascend the Urantia worlds. In 48.5.8, we learn that
one of the purposes of the Urantia career is to effect the permanent eradication from the mortal survivors of such animal vestigial traits as procrastination, equivocation, insincerity, problem avoidance, unfairness, and ease-seeking.
I am certain that you know at least one person in your life that exemplifies at least one of these characteristics. It is also written in 9.5.7 that
Too often, all too often, you mar your minds by insincerity and smear them with unrighteousness. You subject them to animal fear and distort them by useless anxiety.
being a therapist myself, I most certainly appreciate this statement, since animal fear and reactions associated with fight, flight, freeze, call for help, and play dead are universal defense mechanisms of all primate minds. On top of these primal emotional or survival reactions, we as the human race are constantly struggling with resisting the urges of egoism, which can represent itself in perpetual and unbalanced state of self-interest. These realities easily contribute to much of what John envisioned in his book of Revelation, which is the ascendant mortal progression associated with overcoming our fallible creature attributes that contrast divine nature. This is a contrasting perspective against the doom and gloom some once thought the book of Revelation represented, since we learn that much of what John witnessed is most certainly things that we should be looking forward to. We learn that in 47:9.1, that the last stop before the mark of the beast is completely eradicated is the seventh mansion world, where
any discernible differences between those mortals hailing from the isolated and retarded worlds and those survivors from the more advanced and enlightened spheres are virtually obliterated during the sojourn on the seventh mansion world. Here you will be purged of all the remnants of unfortunate heredity, unwholesome environment, and unspiritual planetary tendencies. The last remnants of the mark of the beast are here eradicated.
retarded worlds can be greatly envisioned like our own planet of Urantia, that currently is designated as a spiritual quarantine planet due to both the Lucifer rebellion along with the default of the material sons Adam and Eve. Beastly individuals are characteristic towards only seeing the differences in other persons, engulfed by fear, enveloped by a lust for their own self-importance, with a keen interest in simply having more at the cost of those around them. This can be seen as the wealthy oppressing the poor, or the less commonly realized indolent feasting off the backs of the hardworking. In 69.2.2, it states that before
The dawn of early frugality and primitive industry, the lot of the average tribe was one of destitution and real suffering. Early man had to compete with the whole animal world for his food. Competition gravity ever pulls man down towards the beast level. Poverty is his natural and tyrannical state. Wealth is not a natural gift. It results from labor, knowledge, and organization.
this quote means to me that we often see the worst in people when they are scared or succumb to their instinctive beastly attributes. This can be seen by empty shelves at grocery stores after that famous pandemic, or when a hurricane or snowstorm is about to hit. Perhaps this same quote might resonate with you associated with mob mentalities, when groups of people or entire nations can hurt others through intolerance and opportunistic crimes against humanity. When it comes to being opportunistic, 79.16 takes my indolent statement a step further, indicating that
The weak and inferior have always contended for equal rights. They have always insisted that the state compel the strong and superior to supply their wants and otherwise make good those deficiencies which all too often are the natural result of their own indifference and indolence.
in my field, we call this term malingering, when an individual feigns or exaggerates a mental or physical illness for financial gain or to escape responsibilities. Perhaps this can be seen with individuals concealing their own wealth to obtain special government assistance programs or mailbox money. Just to be clear here as well, the Urantia Book often prizes the disabled and disenfranchised, much like Jesus, citing the immense spiritual growth that can develop from overcoming these challenges. Weak and inferior are referring to spiritual progress and development, and not physical or mental health disabling conditions, although that can be a false platform for the spiritually delayed to get out of work and their responsibility. We learn in 69.2.5 that
Labor, the efforts of design, distinguishes man from the beast, whose exertions are largely instinctive. The necessity for labor as man's paramount blessing. The prince's staff all worked. They did much to ennoble physical labor on Urantia. Adam was a gardener. The God of the Hebrews labored. He was the creator and upholder of all things. The Hebrews were the first tribe to put a supreme premium on industry. They were the first people to decree that he who does not work shall not eat.
In psychology, many counselors learn that we have a nasty tendency to marginalize the disabled through simply giving them mailbox money. That is simply just enough for them to survive, concealing them from the rest of society and robbing them of the opportunities of establishing meaning and significance in their own lives that we develop through work. As an example, how many retirees would make a killer therapeutic mentor for an adolescent child? Conclusion. So what is the end goal for all of this? Is spiritual ascension as easy as basically doing the exact opposite of our beastly predispositions? In 164:1.2-3, a lawyer challenged Jesus associated with attempting to entrap him into going against Jewish law that defined a neighbor as child of one's people. Seeing the dilemma associated with the only acceptable neighbor response being a Jewish affiliation, Jesus told a parable instead, which stated,
A certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell into the hands of cruel brigands, who robbed him, stripped him, and beat him, and departing, left him half dead. Very soon, by chance, a certain priest was going down the way, and when he came upon the wounded man, seeing his sorry plight, he passed by the other side of the road. And in like manner, a Levite also, when he came across and saw the man, passed by to the other side. Now, about this time, a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed down to Jericho, came across this wounded man, and when he saw how he had been robbed and beaten, he was moved with compassion. And going over to him, he bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and sending the man upon his own beast, brought him here to the inn and took care of him. And on the morrow, he took out some money, and giving it to the host, said, Take good care of my friend. And if the expense is more, when I come back again, I will repay you. Now let me ask you, which one of these three turned out to be the neighbor of him who fell among the robbers? And when the lawyer perceived that he had fallen into his own snare, he answered, He who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said, Go and do likewise.
I can imagine that you no longer have to guess where the term Good Samaritan comes from. When people say that we evolved from apes, which by the way contrasts to what the Urantia Book indicates, a sign that this potential is not true lays with how a primate mind works. Christ Michael makes this very clear whilst explaining why a dog does not have a soul to Ganid in the following passage, located in 132.8.
That afternoon, Jesus and Ganid had both enjoyed playing with a very intelligent shepherd dog, and Ganid wanted to know whether the dog had a soul, whether it had a will. And in response to his questions, Jesus said, The dog has a mind which can know material man, his master, but cannot know God, who is spirit. Therefore, the dog does not possess a spiritual nature and cannot enjoy a spiritual experience. The dog may have a will derived from nature and augmented by training, but such a power of mind is not a spiritual force. Neither is it comparable to the human will, inasmuch as it is not reflective. It is not the result of discriminating higher and moral meanings or choosing spiritual and eternal values. It is the possession of such powers of spiritual discrimination and truth-choosing that makes mortal man a moral being, a creature endowed with the attributes of spiritual responsibility and the potential of eternal survival. Jesus went on to explain that it is the absence of such mental powers in the animal which makes it forever impossible for the animal world to develop language in time or to experience anything equivalent to personality survival in eternity.
So even some of the most advanced animals can predict, learn, and solve problems. However, what makes them different from us is that they cannot go back in time in their minds to reflect on what had transpired, nor seek higher moral values in their lives that are the essence of the human soul. Being a Good Samaritan is a badge of future cosmic citizenship that we can all share together. So after watching today's video, reflect back on what you took from today's presentation and choose the higher road by subscribing to this channel. That's a joke, by the way. Sort of.